Alright guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to episode 3 in our introduction to Unity. And this is where we're gonna start now making a simple car racing game. So when we stopped in the previous video, I told you guys to create a terrain like that. It's a simple terrain, we don't want something too big. And then now we're gonna look at the detailed part of terrains and the terrain, what we can do with the terrain. Then we're gonna get into all that good stuff in this episode. So if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turn on post notifications, leave a like on the video if you enjoy it, and let's get into making ourselves a car racing game. Alright, so once we have our terrain here, we've got on the inspector, we've got this drop down here which is named terrain, and they're the terrain tools. So you've got create neighboring terrains, which you can add another terrain to make the area larger, but we're not going to do that. We just want to use this very small area here. Then you have got the rise and lower terrain, or the brushes. So you've got raise and lower terrain, you've got paint holes, you've got paint texture, you've got set height, smooth height, and stamp terrain. So stamp terrain would basically just, if we use, so let's start from stamp terrain. If we use this brush, let's use this, let's use this one. If we wanted to stamp on the terrain, if we increase the stamp height here to 53, you see that? We can literally just make a mountain without having to paint it, and that you would stamp the brush that you are using onto the terrain in the height that you've given. If we use this one, see, this is a different kind of like, what do I call this? This brush gives us a different effect. If we did that, see, it creates this nice looking, I should say, hill. This is more of a hill, but this is more of, well, we're gonna call it a little mountain area as well, right? Then let's do this, and then we can also stamp like that, and we can have something like that. Then we've got smooth height. Now smooth height, like it says, it's just to smoothen the terrain. So you see the opacity here, I forgot to talk about opacity. The opacity generally is how much the effect should show when you use the tool that you're using. So if it's smooth height, if you make it at 100 opacity, let's use it somewhere where we can vividly see. For instance, here, if you do that, do you see what has happened there? Most detail of the detail that we had, which was something like this, is gone because we've smoothed it at 100. And then if we use opacity 50, let's just say 50, then we try and smoothen it here. You see? Do you see the difference? This is 50, this is 100. This has been smoothened out. And if we use like this brush, it can even smoothen it further. So yeah. Now let's look at that smooth height. Let's look at set height. Set height is generally what you want a height of a certain area to be. So if we say we want the height to be 300, and then we came and tried to paint here, it will raise the terrain to 300. So when it stops there, so when it stops, you see here where it just stopped, this is 300 right there. You see that? That's 300 because it's no longer raising, it's just flattening out. And then you've got that really weird looking thing there, very weird looking, but that's setting height. You can set different height and you can flatten the whole thing to 300, and now it's we can actually now paint down because the thing about a terrain is that if it's on 0, you cannot paint lower. You have first to set it to paint higher. We'll get to textures later. You would have first to set it higher before you could paint lower. So if I try to press shift, which is to, I guess, do the inverse of whatever you're doing. So for instance, here we're trying to lower it is to hold shift. And then if we try to lower the terrain like that, we can't do that because the terrain height right now is at 0. But if we were to increase it first, increase the height of the terrain like that, then let's reduce the brush a bit, then lower it, you can see that we can create a river looking thing there, and we could fill it with water and have an actual river. So you cannot go below 0 when you are lowering your terrain. So if you want to paint rivers and stuff, you'd have to raise your terrain before you lower the land to have these kind of dips in it. All right, so now we've done all that. Let's now add a texture. So first of all, let me just flatten the whole terrain again. All right, so let's add a texture to this. Right now, it's the material that's on this terrain is this checkered material. Now, materials are basically, or rather, are what we use to define the appearance of certain game objects or our scene in general. So you've got textures, then you can apply textures to materials, and then those materials can be applied to game objects, and they give different looks to the game object and to the game itself. So right now the material that we have here is a checkered material, but we want to make this look more like a ground, so we need to have a kind of grass texture. Okay, so I imported the Nature Starter Kit 2. You can get this from the asset store. It's free, and it has got ground 1, 2, 3, and stuff like that. Now we're just gonna use ground 1, and what this is just a texture. So we have materials, but right now we're just gonna use a texture because we wanna paint the texture onto the terrain. So when you come on paint textures here, you've got this little gear here, edit terrain textures. So you can create a new texture, then we can say create terrain texture, then we can select ground here, and if you do not have it, it will paint the whole thing. If you do not have it, you can select anything else, then come to your ground texture. Once you click on terrain layers here, then when you scroll down here, you've got this little drop down here, so you can change the type of ground here to and once you change that, it will change the whole terrain ground material. So now we duplicate this ground texture, and then we change the duplicate to a normal map. Now what a normal map does is that it reflects light. I guess it reflects light better. Then we apply from grayscale, and then we come under normal map here, you add it. And now let's go down and see. So this is our ground texture, and so when we increase the normal map, look what what happens. You see that? So we want the normal map to just be the default one. Then you've got tiling. So right now it's at 2 by 2. Tiling is basically how many times this texture is repeated on this or on the specific game object, for in our case on the terrain. So if we were to make it 8 by 8. You see now, you saw the change. You could see the change. I'm actually gonna leave it as that, and I'm gonna leave it as that. That's what tiling is. Most of these things you are gonna learn of them as you use them, and you're gonna see the different effects that they have. Then you've got metallicness and smoothness. So metallicness is how metallic the thing is, like it says, and you see the effect. It kind of makes it darker per se. Then smoothness is how smooth it is, so you can make it look like a watery surface. Smoothness could make it look like the surface is wet. See that? But also we're just gonna leave it as is. So for right now, we've created our terrain. We have added a texture to our terrain. It looks good right now. And then we're gonna try and add a bit of detail. Let me see how much time I've been doing this right now. I don't want to make it too long. 16. All right, we can do one more thing. So we could let's try and add some hues just to make our terrain have so we could say raise and lower terrain. Select a brush and then just paint like that, then let's increase the brush to a certain degree, and then paint in the sides like that. Okay, so our track is gonna be in this area here. So do that, change the brush, then do that. Nice. All right, so we've got our terrain, and then we've got our surrounding hues like that. So once you've all made your terrains how you want them to look, take your time with them. Don't rush it. Just take your time. Make it look as good as you might want it to look. For tutorial purposes, mine are not going to be. I'm just going to be doing it quickly. But you guys take your time with it. This is your game, so you want it to look the way you want it. You're not creating for anybody. It should impress you the most. You should be happy with your work. So make sure you deal with the terrain, paint your hues, or play with the tools. These tools can make you create some beautiful, stunning terrains. Play around with them. In future episodes, I'm going to show you how to actually bring real life terrains or real life locations into your game, so that you can not have to do this whole painting of hues and stuff. You can just smoothen it out. But first we have got to learn how to also do this hard part. So paint it, make it look the way I want it to look, add the texture that you want to it. Then in the next episode, we're going to look at standard assets and creating a track. So we're going to look at bringing a car and creating a track for our racing game. That will be in the next episode. So if you've enjoyed this episode, leave a like, comment what you want to see, turn on post notifications, subscribe, and let's talk down in the comment section so that we can develop together as we do our game design. It's fun to see what you guys want. It's fun to see what you guys think, and then how we can make the lessons better. You can tell me if you where you do not understand, and I will personally try to explain it to you on an individual basis. Yeah, so consider subscribing if you're new, as I said, and I'll see you all in the next one. We'll be right back.